Hello,
Hello, everyone.
welcome to another episode in the program.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I didn't think we'd get this far, quite frankly. I thought we'd have fizzled out by now, but there it is.
Should be going. Sorry, there's been a bit of a delay, folks, in the new episode, but me and Fred have had to find the time to record it around our shifts.
Yeah, it's not been easy. But, these things happen. Life gets in the way. And, we just... but we're at it now, so to speak. And, yeah.
Okay, well, I want to start. Can I kick us off by giving you...
Yes, by all means, start us off.
Are you sitting down? Are you ready?
I was born ready. Go on.
I've left the Labour Party.
Never.
True, absolutely true.
Oh shit, bro.
There's partly for positive reasons. I mean, cards on the table. My personal life is changing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting to a point now where I predict in the next 2 to 5 years I'm going to have less time for political activism anyway.
Well, yeah, I get that. I
already thought to myself last year, before the last election, that come what may, and even if we were living under the socialist government of my dreams, I would still decline. I would still choose not to stand for any new jobs in my branch or my CLP when the time comes to have our annual AGMs, which decide these things. So effectively, I would take on. I was already intending to take on less and less work, and gradually to the point where my actual active involvement in politics would just take a back seat, and I would basically be a paper member of the party, at least for the next 5 years, while me and my girlfriend get our lives sorted out, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that entirely.
But I've decided to not remain a member because it looks highly likely that as long as this period of my life is going to coincide with Starmer's leadership, I just thought to myself, I'm not going to lift a fucking finger to help these.
Well, you don't necessarily have to lift a finger to help, but you can still be part. You can still have a voice within. I mean, it's easier to have a voice within than to have a voice looking from outside.
I mean, I am still a member of some affiliated societies, so if there is a leadership election, for example, I would still get a vote on the leader.
Okay, well, that's promising, at least.
Unless of course they change the rules, which they may do. But,
well, I mean, that depends on that particular wing of the party if they want to change their approach, and that's kind of how things are in America at the moment. How the Republican Party is stupidly, has a massive hard-on for voter suppression, which is basically what it amounts to. They classify it as voter identification, despite the fact that voter fraud can amounts to less than 0.5% of the overall sort of thing. And to be fair, voter fraud is something completely stupid to commit, especially given this, certainly in America anyway. I don't actually know about what the penalty is here. I imagine it's reasonably severe. It certainly is in America. The idea that one would commit such a pointless crime, unless you're doing it, I don't know, a couple of million times over. Yeah. That's the only way that voter fraud actually works. In this, in the British context, where instead of voting, instead of a state, the equivalent would be to vote for a county, which something we don't do. We vote at a very localized level. One would have to commit voter fraud several thousand times to actually make a difference.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the systems in between Britain and America are slightly different. I mean, the British system.
Not kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in America, it is just a lot easier to commit voter fraud. I mean, the classic example is in the year 2000, where, you know, a large section of the black electorate were left off the ballot paper in Florida, which is a key state. Now,
yeah, it's amazing how Florida is a key state.
Yeah.
given the fact that they are kind of the joke of America, and
Yeah.
that's nothing against the state of Florida. However, if you look at a random news story from America, chances are it begins Florida man X.
Yeah, that is very true. You know.
Yeah, and it's always something stupidly outrageous, like Florida man gets high on meth and gets, and has to take like 16 cops to take him down.
Yeah.
And he's still jumping around and knocking 4 of them out and masturbating at the same time.
Or takes lots of meth and buggers crocodile or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But as they're referred to on The Simpsons, the freaky states, Florida.
Freaky states, yes.
But anyway, but the governor of Florida at the time was Jeb Bush, which was
well, there's a shock.
And his father is the not only former president, but also former director of the CIA. I mean, nothing suspicious there. But there is actually one example. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Fred, but there is actually one example within living memory of There's an example within living memory of an American presidential election being rigged. So, in 1960. Joe Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, was
right.
He really wanted to get Jackie into the White House. Now, I can't remember exactly what happened, but Joe Kennedy, I think there was some shenanigans going on with the Kennedy family, and they managed to either suppress or inflate their votes or their opponents' votes enough to get John F. Kennedy over the line and into the White House. And that election, again, 1960 presidential election between Kennedy and Nixon, remains one of the closest results in American presidential election history.
I didn't know that. However, I was reminded by a colleague of ours who is very much on the opposite side of the political spectrum, I was quite astounded to learn the scale of this. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. But there was one particular president that would have won, I should say, all 50 states, bar one. And I can't remember which particular state, but it was because there was I think it came down to one elector in the electoral college of that state, who basically said that they didn't believe in one person gaining all 50 states.
Yeah.
And this was the Reagan versus Walter Mondale election. So Reagan would have won all 50 had it not have been for this one elector swinging it for one state. And I find that quite fascinating, how that is a thing in America.
Yeah. Well,
not to disparage the American system, it is what it is. You know, our system, first past the post, isn't perfect. And neither is the electoral college system. But actually, Britain used to have an electoral college type system. I can't remember how far back we are going, but it was kind of a thing. And now, obviously, we have a first past the post local constituency kind of issue. Whereas, where this doesn't represent the the sort of overall majority or even minority of an electorate, for example, and I've said this on a previous video where so many people voted for the UK Independence Party and yet they got no seats. This is in 2019.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean,
And whereas, and I said at the time, whereas I don't believe that that UKIP should ever have any kind of platform. At the same time, if people, the principle stands that if people vote for something, then then their voice should be represented.
exactly. But I know, I mean, it happens with other minority parties. I mean, the Green Party got nearly 1 million votes at one election.
Absolutely, and I used to be a Green Party voter, pretty much before Jeremy Corbyn became Labour leader.
Yeah,
and,
but if you get
also after Nick Clegg did his kind of bend over and take it royally, but from the Conservatives.
Yeah, but if you get 1 million votes, you should, by rights, have a group of MPs in Parliament numbering maybe 23 MPs. But unfortunately, the way the British electoral system works is it only produces one MP. And, I was thinking about this to myself. Ultimately, British elections are decided by about 1 million or so people, and they take on a very similar type. They read small circulation newspapers like the Mail and the Sun in swing constituencies in the Midlands and the North, and this small minority of voters, only about 1 million or so voters, these basically decide the outcome of an election for about 60 million people. And I think when you combine that with the fact that the majority of you look at the bit of the Labour Party. This is leading me back to the Labour Party. If you look at the bit of the Labour Party which is actually growing in number, it's all young people between the ages of 18 and 35, and they mostly are in big urban centres where, if you vote Labour in say, for example, Manchester, and the entire constituency votes Manchester, there's nothing important about a one vote on top of 50,000 votes. I mean, Diane Abbott's the number of votes that Diane Abbott gets in a Hackney constituency is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it's enormous. It's bigger than Theresa May's entire constituency. So, in other words, the number of people in Hackney who voted for Diane Abbott
is bigger than Maidenhead. The people who vote for
entire Maidenhead constituency. I mean, that's awful. So effectively, you could say that if you live in Hackney, your vote doesn't count because there are so many, because that's the way the electoral system is. But
what's interesting, actually, if I may again draw a comparison with America, they have actually passed a law that prohibits basically joke candidates. Ever since, I think it was actually in the 2016 election, where a lot of momentum was being gathered for an independent candidate who put his name, I think he was actually just a teenager, he put his name down as simply D's Nuts. Which is in reference to a popular meme in 2016. And that in and of itself is hilarious. I mean, I would vote for D's Nuts if it was in Britain. But whereas in Britain, we've kind of embraced our joke candidates. The classic example, of course, being the Monster Raving Loony Party, which for those of you listening who aren't familiar with British politics, that is absolutely a real thing. In the 1970s, I think it was. I think that's when the party started. It was actually the lead singer of a rock band, and he's. I think his name was Frederick Such. Was it Frederick? Something like that. Anyway, but he put his name down as Screaming Lord Such, and he was the leader of the Monster Raving Loony Party. And since then, a lot of constituencies up and down Great Britain have fielded candidates for the Monster Raving Loony Party, and every single time they lose their deposit. But at the same time, you've got to give them that kind of grudging respect
Mhm.
where this guy, and members of the Looney Party, they dress up in gaudy, outrageous clothing, kind of like a glam rock band in many ways, um, and really say outrageous things, not offensive, but just things that you wouldn't consider to be genuine. For example, there was actually a good example of this is in the sitcom Blackadder, a British sitcom Blackadder, where they actually send up the Monster Raving Loony Party, and the candidates' policies are something like, where for the compulsory serving of asparagus at breakfast and the abolition of slavery. And then then the person doing the interview says, everyone can understand your perfectly normal and logical stance on asparagus, but what is all this about? All this silliness about abolishing slavery?
Yeah. Well, that's true, isn't it? I mean, the things which it's interesting, isn't it? The things which are now we now take for granted in politics, things which are just normal, were at one point considered utterly bonkers.
Yes.
And so who knows? Maybe we'll see half of the last Labour manifesto ultimately implemented as policy. I mean, I believe that I really do genuinely believe that a lot of the policies which were sneered at and were mocked by the Tory party, by the media as, extreme left-wing, militant, hopeless, idealistic, pie-in-the-sky nonsense will ultimately become the political common sense. I mean, a good example of that would be basic income. And look at the strides that basic income has made in a relatively short space of time. And I remember the first time I ever heard about basic income, even though the concept has been around for a very long time, was in 2015, where the Green Party became the first party to officially announce this as part of its election manifesto. It announced that it was going to give if it got into government, it would pay the population the basic minimum wage, regardless of whether they were actively looking for work or not. And this was sneered at in the most outrageous terms. People said, "Oh, it's crazy, it's bonkers, it's just giving money to people who are feckless and idle." But you look at the strides it's made in 5 years, and it's amazing.
Yes, I believe it's had a pilot scheme in Finland.
Yeah, it's had a pilot scheme in Finland, which have got they've actually got quite good results on it, actually. So initially, I heard a lot coming out of Finland that the early indicators of how well the pilot scheme was going were not bringing back good news. But actually, now that the pilot scheme has gone on for a little bit more time, people are seeing the positive impacts that basic income is making. And Spain are because PSOE, which is the kind of Keir Starmer bit of left Spanish politics, they are in power with Podemos, and they are experimenting with a bit of they're experimenting with a basic income scheme now.
I hope it's in Catalonia. I mean, mostly to as far as Spanish politics goes, I think the Madrid government would want to do their best to keep the people of Catalonia happy now, given that they declared when Catalonia sort of had that little vote, and I say little vote like it's disparaging again. No, it's not. They had a vote to declare sort of an independent Catalonian state, and it was really savagely condemned all round, even from countries outside of Spain, almost like we were witnessing the second secession of the slave states, the Confederate States of America.
Yeah. So but I mean, I think that is interesting, but it just goes to show you, how quickly things can change. I mean, bearing in mind, basic income's gone from the Green Party, a small minority party in the UK, to the shadow cabinet. Now, there was a period where John McDonnell was saying, if the Labour Party got into government, it would experiment.
It said it would consider, but it didn't. he was very guarded in his response to that. He said he would consider universal basic income, not even going so far as to say we would actually have a go.
Yeah, but you get the sense that John McDonnell would consider it more seriously than a Tory government. So
yes, and yet we find ourselves here in early to mid 2020, where people who are having to be furloughed from work, who are basically being paid to stay at home.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to stay at home, actually. That's a bit of a misnomer, but being paid regardless of what they do.
Yeah, I mean,
they're free to look for other work.
I think it was significant that just before the furlough scheme was announced, Boris Johnson was asked a direct question about basic income, and he didn't rule it out. Now in Westminster speak, that is quite significant because
as far as Westminster goes, that's almost like saying, yeah, great stuff.
It's almost like saying, well, it's not a yes, but it's a maybe. So that is significant, I think, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if, in the long run, if this coronavirus crisis, if heaven forbid we get a second wave of this coronavirus crisis and we all have to be furloughed again, or even if a second wave and it's worse than the first one,
which is most likely.
It wouldn't surprise me if closing all the tax havens and basic income was actually a cheaper way of getting the economy to survive through the coronavirus crisis. And that's partly, I think, what's driving the move to lift lockdown now, is that there's no doubt a civil servant who's worked out that basic income is cheaper than what the Conservative government are currently planning to do with regard to the economy. And I reckon that a lot of these Tory backbenchers are getting a little panicky now, and they're just worried that if this crisis goes on for any much longer, the calls to implement a basic income will get louder and louder and louder to the point where the government can't ignore it. And it's not so much the matter of it being cheaper. No doubt Tory businessmen would welcome it being cheaper. It's the fact that that dimension of basic income is not where the fear is amongst the Tory backbenchers. The fear is the fact that if you just give people a basic income, they are going to have so much more freedom than they did, earning a pittance in the neoliberal era.
Which is interesting because when you think about it, the sort of the sort of capitalist society that we have that we have grown up in post Cold War, realistically, giving people basic, I say basic, giving your standard John Smith, Joe Bloggs kind of guy more money in his or her pocket, that realistically feeds in to capitalism, because what is the one thing you do with money is you spend it.
Yeah.
The one thing that you don't really do in a capitalist society is spend.
Yeah.
Is save. Sorry, I'm a bit drunk, but is to save money.
Yeah. Don't worry, mate. These are the best podcasts. Whenever.
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I certainly hope so. But yeah, it's to save money, because even I have been guilty of this. I'm one of these people that thinks, well, you can't spend it when you're dead.
Yeah.
And one never knows when one's number is up. It's interesting how we're sort of against this idea, as far as a general societal view goes. Mm-hmm. We're against the idea of giving someone something for nothing. Mm-hmm. And yet that something is what runs our economy.
Mm.
If you give someone who has very little, that all of a sudden you give them some spending power, then they can power and prop up major companies that actually contribute to, in this case, certainly, the Conservative, the Conservative Party, actually, when you think about it, because, if all of a sudden, if you have nothing, and then all of a sudden you're given a few £100, you can obviously go and buy a few things. You can go and buy something nice off Amazon, or you can pay your rent to a private landlord, who just probably happens to either be a Tory or contribute to the Tories, or you can buy a copy of the Daily Mail, which again, major supporter of the Tory party. It just goes on, and of course, pretty much every purchase you make, there's tax taken from that in the form of VAT that goes to the Exchequer. It is a self-perpetuating system.
Mm-hmm.
The more people have, the more people will spend. This is just, if you're in a rubbish job, and then all of a sudden you've applied for another better paying job, and you get that job, all of a sudden you've got more money, you've got more disposable income, and you will inevitably buy nicer things and live a generally higher standard of life. The perfect example here is something my dad has told me on many occasions, and he's absolutely right. Money cannot buy you happiness, which of course is we all know, but it can buy you a better class of misery. And that's what it stands for, and that's what capitalism basically is. Yes, the things on your telly may be telling you that we're all doomed, we're all fucked. But at the same time, wouldn't it be great to receive that message on a 60-inch Samsung curved TV mounted on the wall?
Yeah.
Fuck me, that would look great.
Yeah.
In HD, 4K, fucking, surround sound. Yes, of course, you're still being fucked, but at least you're receiving it in a way that you're like, nice.
Yeah.
and it is self-perpetuating. It is self-perpetuating, but it works. It does work, and it's, as a lefty, it's awful to say, to admit that these things, do work, but they do. And we just have to accept that. We have to accept that that the world is going to shit, but at least we've got an ice dispenser in our fridge freezer.
Can I stop you there, Fred? I've just had a text from our first fan.
We have a fan? Fuck me.
Yeah, we don't have. We have about 9 subscribers now.
So
yeah. So we're not sure who these people are, but we do have one genuine fan now, and okay. So he's called Jake, and he's my mate from Scarborough.
Okay, well, hello, Jake.
I shared the Keir Starmer episode with him, and he has now listened to all the episodes, and he can't wait for this one.
Oh shit!
He's just saying,
I hope he's not disappointed, because
So he's just texting saying, "Have you guys done the episode yet?" Text me now saying, "We're doing it now, bro." So Jake, if you're listening, thanks, mate. Thanks for listening to the program. Really appreciate your support.
I tip my fedora if I had one.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jake. Yes, your patronage is most welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. And when this goes massive, you'll have the pleasure of being the first fan. Anyway,
yes,
but
that's the first shout out. How about that?
Yeah, but I want to like speaking. Go just to take it back to the Labour Party for a minute.
Okay.
I just want to get on the air, and I want to get this on record because I may never meet this person ever again. Right. So one of the reasons I left the Labour Party is it suddenly struck me the way the democratic organs of the Labour Party are supposed to work is that the only people who get promoted in the party are utter cunts. So,
ouch.
If you look at the structure of the Labour Party,
sorry, I'm just reeling from that.
It looks like the when you look at the structures of the Labour Party, it's actually closer to something like an NGO rather than a political party. Because I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm not exactly. But, well, the third sector, the charity sectors, they're actually private organisations. Britain doesn't have a charity sector; it has two sectors: a private sector and a public sector.
Yes.
So charities are private institutions, which is why I'm suspicious of Labour MPs coming from the management sections of charities. Obviously, some MPs will have been frontline workers in charities, and that's great. I'm all in favour of frontline workers in, say, like children's safeguarding charities or drug and alcohol charities becoming Labour MPs. But I'm not a fan of people being taken from the management class within the charity sector. And there's been
I agree there because
yeah, I'm glad you agree. And there's been a lot of that over the last 10 or 15 years. Now, I just want to bring people's attention to, because I have a feeling that this person is going to be a Labour MP in one or two election cycles, probably two actually. So she's called Alison Hume.
Okay.
And I know her a bit from York Labour Party, and she is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the worst people I've ever encountered in the Labour Party. So I don't know if you know this, but one of the potential models for the city that we're in is Canterbury. So the city that my CLP is very similar to Canterbury in lots of ways. It shares a lot of characteristics, and in no exaggeration, this woman is the most arrogant, self-aggrandizing, cynical opportunist I have ever met in my entire life. The first time I ever met her was when I was briefly representing the party at candidate level, and there was a workshop for us candidates on campaigning and persuading, and this woman turned up. She announced herself that she'd been a screenwriter and that she'd won BAFTA awards, and then she went into a strange kind of orgasmic rhapsody about Angela Rayner and how wonderful she was.
An orgasmic rhapsody? Fuck me, I love that. You have a way with words, I'll give you that.
Yeah, and a kind of PN to her charms and things, but it wasn't the kind of, it was so fake, because I think Angela Rayner's got this. There's a side to Angela Rayner I respect in some ways, but this was so blatantly put on for an audience. I mean, you could see straight through it that she wasn't sincere. And
a bit like how hostages are like, yes, ISIS are treating me very well. They are lovely people, and their ideology is not as bad as they think. Yeah.
Now, this woman has subsequently become obvious that she is a hard-nosed right-winger. She is progress. I think she may even be a member of the progress group. So she tried to get the nomination for the provisional parliamentary candidate for the constituency next door to where we're living, and she went to the local university's Labour club and said how much she loved Jeremy Corbyn, but everyone knew she was a member of Progress, and like this, I mean, and it's since that point it's hard to describe how annoying she is, how outrageous she is, and the cynicism, the cynical opportunism of this woman is just beyond belief. Every single statement that comes out of her mouth is intended to further her career. And and I was speaking to a wonderful bloke called Tim Murgatroyd.
Mr. Murgatroyd.
Yeah. So Murgatroyd is a writer. He's a novelist and journalist, and he used to write a column in the local constituency newspaper, and he did fantastic work for us because he was possibly the only sympathetic local newspaper columnist, the only newspaper columnist who was sympathetic to the Labour Party in the whole of the Yorkshire area, and did absolutely fantastic work for us. And he said it so marvelous. He said, Alex, Alison Hume isn't fit for office, and she's not at all. So, but I guarantee you, she has been. I mean, the job she's collected is amazing. She has been, no exaggeration. This is the jobs Alison Hume has collected in 2 years. They have been nominated as a possible local election candidate. She's been a European election candidate. She's been ward chair, ward organiser, chair of the Women's Forum, and a comms officer briefly for our would-be police and crime commissioner candidate. I mean, this is outrageous. And I thought to myself, and also the other thing she knows, she got me kicked off York Labour members' Facebook page. She's just right. She reported me, so I was having a row with the Momentum lot about something or other.
You went against the groupthink, didn't you? Big Brother said no.
What I said was these people were attacking Tim Murgatroyd, and I said the left, right, ... That's Tim Murgatroyd. He's done so much for socialism in our city. And Alison Hume said, see, this is what she actually wrote. She said, I'm reporting this, and I said, on what grounds? And I said, it's divisive. She said, it's divisive. It should be unified. And this later changed to, I was having a go at the LGBT community. And I thought, which is complete and utter bollocks. And I thought, you know what? If that is the quality of the person who is being promoted at constituency party level, if our standards of talent have descended that much that this fuckwit can even remotely be considered parliamentary material, I'm just not going to bother. You know, this.
Wow.
She is and no exaggeration. I mean, the perverse part of me would like her to become a Labour MP for somewhere, just so you can see her awfulness. But anyway, if she does, I would like it to be on record here, is that Alison, I hate you. You are without a shadow of a doubt one of the worst people in the whole of Labour Party, and the best thing you do can get out of public life and not bother the party ever again. You know. So, but anyway, she so
that's some strong words, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can't comment here because of the fact that I do not know. I've no experience of this lass at all.
Well, do you know what, Fred? You may do one day in the future, because
I mean, I wouldn't put it past myself, because I'm a sod for. I can't let something lie. If something's bollocks and I see it, I have to fucking correct it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just wait, because I've got a feeling she could be at least a candidate somewhere, if not be given a seat. I mean, a safe seat. Just you wait. Just Just remember the name, okay?
I remember, and it will be interesting if this person would potentially have her own episode at some point.
Well, yeah, maybe in the year 2030, we can have our own episode.
If we're all still alive, if we haven't sort of succumbed to the Rona by then.
Yeah, I mean, I've memory like an elephant. I don't forget.
I have a memory like a goldfish, so I suppose that balances us out quite nicely.
There's so much. There's such a wealth of talent in this part in the Labour Party at grassroots level. You think of the talented people who never ever, who didn't even come close to getting a seat. That is a brilliant bloke called Colin Moynihan, who did the brilliant speech in defence of the Palestinian cause at a conference in 2018, where everyone rose Palestinian flags. Do you remember that?
I don't, but by all means, crack on.
He tried to be a candidate last time, and he didn't make it. I mean, we live in a world in which the Labour Party is in such bad shape that Margaret Hodge was a Labour candidate, Colin Moynihan, Chris Williamson, who else? Mark Seddon. These people were not. And that is the reality of the Labour Party, unfortunately.
Margaret Hodge at least has tenure. Before it was widely known that she was actually quite a nasty person. Yeah, the woman, the Saint Margaret, who covered up paedophiles in Islington care homes. That one. Islington care homes, and also was all for the destruction of a Jewish cemetery, I believe. No, I'm not familiar with that one. No, it's something I remember reading, something along the lines of there was some kind of Jewish cemetery that she had signed off on being pretty much destroyed, and the person who opposed it was just an insignificant jock called Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah, well, I'd have to look that up again. So I'm getting it right, but absolutely instructive, isn't it? You know why they hate each other, don't you, Margaret Hodge and Jeremy Corbyn? I think we've touched on this on a previous episode. So, well, we're not exactly her biggest fans, are we? No, we're not exactly the biggest Hodge in the world. But you know that they both went up for the. Oh yes, yeah, they both went for the same post or something, didn't they? It wouldn't have actually been 1983. It would have been, I imagine, a couple of years beforehand. But yeah, and Jeremy absolutely caned her, didn't he? Yeah. The story is that Margaret Hodge, who was chair of Islington Council at the time, I think she was anyway, and that Margaret Hodge went up as very much the candidate of the party machine, and Jeremy stood as a candidate of ordinary party members and thrashed her, and she has never forgiven him for that. I mean, Jesus Christ, that's 37 years. Get a grip, Well, you'd be surprised how long grudges can last. Yeah. But it's. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you're going to hold a grudge for that length of time, get fucking over it. You were just someone who tried to go up for a CLP. You tried to be the Labour candidate once. It didn't work out for you. You were beaten. Deal with it. It happens to literally thousands of people, hundreds of people up and down the country every election time. Just move the fuck on. But she obviously can't. She's trapped in some sort of awful psychological, some awful kind of psychological punishment room in her own head. Well, yes, and I think this will probably be the same as far as our other most favourite member of the Labour Party goes, Jess Phillips. I imagine we have not heard the last of her, despite having dropped out of the leadership race at the absolute first sign of of any kind of dissent. She ran like an absolute child into her safe space.
That's the most amazing thing about Jess Phillips, is that
she was the most well produced and polished, and yet was the most fragile of them all.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing about her is she had people telling her for 5 years that she was going to be the next leader of the Labour Party, and she folded literally at the first hurdle.
Yeah,
her campaign was embarrassing.
Yeah,
I mean,
and yet, she was quoted as saying that that Boris would be terrified or something of that ilk to face her over this dispatch box.
Yeah.
And yet at the first sign of resistance, she's like, no, I'm gone. No, don't want to do this. No, I didn't want to play anyway. What are you on about?
I don't think Boris Johnson isn't worried one little bit about.
I think Boris would have just bamboozled her with his sheer eruditeness.
I mean, listen, this woman can't even handle a hustings with her own fucking party. How on earth she's going to handle that with Boris Johnson? I have no idea.
No.
Anyway, so listen, but that's me and the Labour Party. Ultimately,
yes, and it's been an interesting segue. Shall we get on to what we actually, nearly over 45 minutes in, shall we get on to what we actually wanted to talk about? And that is Matt Hancock's protective ring.
Yeah, Matt Hancock's protective ring,
which is available in all good sex shops as we speak.
Yeah, a gay porn film starring Matt Hancock.
Absolutely. It really is an interesting series of affairs. Matt Hancock's protective ring. I mean, wow. What a great title. What a great title. Anyway, do take us through a bit of that.
I will do. Hang on a minute. Do you know what? It's been so long.
Yes. For a bit of disclosure here, we actually tried recording this a couple of days ago, but I can't personally speak for my opposite number, but I didn't really think that what we captured was really I didn't really have my mojo going. So I said, should we basically re-record everything? And Alex agreed to that, and here we are. We haven't exactly spoken on everything. There was a few things we covered last time, in the failed recording that hasn't appeared in this one so far.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, the revelation at the time that Alex had left the Labour Party had not been known to me. I assume it's something that's occurred in the last, in the preceding days.
Yeah, it has occurred very much so.
There you go. So that's obviously taken up quite a bit of the first part of this.
Yeah. Do you know what? I can't remember what we were supposed to be talking about. Was it the new? I think it was the new furlough guideline.
We have the new furlough guidelines. I've heard on the news today that from August, the government are demanding that private employers will now be paying is it 75% or 25%?
Yeah, well, I thought they were going to stick with 80, but there was a rumor that we're thinking of cutting it to 60, which would be absolutely insane if they do, because you're basically giving the entire country a 40% pay cut, and
Oh yes. That is it. Yeah. The government are cutting their furlough scheme by 5%. That was it.
Okay.
From August.
Some cutting.
As they say, it winds down, and it's interesting because I honestly don't see how they can say right now that the furlough scheme is winding down, when realistically we don't know that the virus is winding down.
No. I mean, that's I think that is the key point, Fred, and that knits together. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, terrible wind. I've got.
Oh dear! You should never have eaten those balloons.
Yeah. So I've got. So this knits together a lot of the concerns we had about the coronavirus crisis and how the government was handling it. About a couple of weeks ago, we got the new guidelines. It would appear, at least this is what we're being told, that we are going on the downward slope from the first peak. Now, there's a big question about whether this is the downward slope completely or whether there is just simply another big wave waiting for us, and that's a very big question.
Yes, and as far as precedent goes, again, we come back to the infamous Spanish flu of 1918/19, and the second wave was significantly worse by about, I think, about fourfold.
Well, I've seen some really, really quite frightening graphs of the Spanish flu epidemic, where the second wave is about 4 times larger than the first one.
Yes. However, it must be sort of stated in a sort of mitigating factor that back in 1918, people were not as aware as to what caused the spread of viruses, etc., and diseases. You know, that the general public in the modern age are a lot more well informed about how a virus spreads.
You know what? I listened to a very interesting BBC Radio 4 documentary on the 1918 influenza epidemic, and it said to me very interesting. There's a theory that it actually may have started in the trenches of the First World War.
More than likely, because a lot of people would, you know, it was a breeding ground for disease and pathogens. Was the trenches.
Yeah.
You know, you have all of these people packed in together. They were cold, they were wet, they had very limited medical supplies, and you know, it's absolutely plausible that this disease would have started in the trenches.
Yeah. So,
and of course, as the war winds down post-armistice and people get demobbed and they're coming back home, what's the first thing they do? They go and see their families.
Yeah.
And they spread it to their families. Their families are meeting up and saying, "Oh my God, isn't it lovely how amazing all of our boys are back home?" And, you know, it perpetuates that way. So, yeah, I can absolutely see how that is certainly a plausible origin story there.
Absolutely. I mean, and more interesting still, there's a theory it may have originated from the trenches. But what's interesting is, obviously, one of the big accelerating forces behind the 1918 flu was the armistice, right? Because when everyone went out onto the streets of London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, wherever, to celebrate the end of the war, that was actually one of the things which accelerated the virus going around the country. So you had gigantic meetings of huge numbers of people. But more interesting still is, there's nothing actually Spanish about the Spanish flu, but there's a theory about why it's called Spanish. It's because, listen to this, okay, this is interesting. Spain were neutral in the First World War, okay? So every other country had a media blackout except for Spain. So the only country which started actually where the media and the newspapers started writing stories about the influenza was Spain.
Ah,
but it's called Spanish flu.
I didn't know that. I mean, from what I knew, the Spanish flu got its name because that's where it was first identified. However, obviously that particular strain of the influenza virus. But yeah, if people aren't reporting it, then that absolutely makes sense. that they basically got identified as Spanish flu as a default, and it should be stated that now, of course, the WHO, the World Health Organization, does not any longer classify or name a virus or disease / pathogen, whatever, from where it was discovered. Yeah. However, I've seen, and I kind of have to give Donald Trump credit here, because obviously he's been heavily criticized for referring to the current coronavirus outbreak, the COVID-19 pandemic. He's been criticized for referring to it as the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus. Whereas realistically, that's what we've been doing for a long, long time, long before Donald was even born. So, for example, Zika is for, I think it's the Zika River in Brazil. You know, the West Nile virus, Ebola virus from the Ebola River in West Africa. Lyme disease is from a place, I think it's in Vermont. You know, so you know, I don't think he deserves the criticism, but then again, this is kind of what the left do, and you know, if I'm looking critically at it, the left have a propensity to jump on something insignificant and to classify it as something significant. Yeah. So calling it the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus or anything like that, it's irrelevant what you call it. But what matters is identifying the cause and doing everything we can to mitigate a future recurrence.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I mean, obviously, I don't care massively what you actually call it. It's a virus, and it needs.
Yeah.
But the only
name is irrelevant. I mean, it's not. You know, it's not. It's not. You know, there's a myriad of diseases and viruses that affect, and parasites that affect humans, that we name after geographical locations. You know, I've outlined some of them. The German measles, another one that's popped into my head, which is more, you know, more scientifically known as rubella, which is what the one of the or the R, I should say, in the MMR vaccine refers to, rubella. And realistically, it's irrelevant, but what matters is we do what we can to stop it spreading.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern around Donald Trump's calling it the Chinese virus is not so much around the political correctness side of it. I would be quite worried if this is him trying to start a new Cold War with China and to kind of rallying hatred for the Chinese in attempt.
Well, yes, and there has been, as far as I've seen, there has been some extra, you know, a bit of an increase in violence towards Chinese American citizens.
And equally,
and that's abhorrent. So that's entirely disgusting.
Yeah. Equally, you don't want the United States and China to get into a fucking war. You know, that's.
Well, you didn't want the Chinese and Russia, sorry, the Americans and Russia to go into a war, but you know, it happened. Thing.
So we were talking about coronavirus and the government's response to it, and Matt Hancock's.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, the protective ring. Let's bring it back to that. That lovely protective ring. Feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah. So like, it's very warm and accommodating. So So basically, the government's new COVID guidelines released, and they were an utter mess. No one can make head nor tail of them at all. And then what I think has happened is, it sounds to me like the government. What's happened is the 1922 committee met Boris Johnson a week or so before the new guidelines were announced and said, "Listen, it's time to open up the economy." Because I think, as I said to you before, these Tory backbenchers are businessmen. An astonishing number of the Tory backbenchers are landlords, and they're all losing money because of, because of furlough. And so they said, right, so open up the economy. And what they've tried to do is they've tried to get enough people moving around the economy to get them going back to work, but not enough to try and give the virus a slow release, kind of a thing.
Yes, it's very much a mitigated response, as opposed to an outright open the floodgates or shut the floodgates, so to speak.
Yeah. So but the whole thing's been an absolute mess.
Yes.
And it's like the government just seem to be stumbling from one disaster to another. And the only good thing to be said about now is I hope all this comes out in a public inquiry, because it's been a total disaster. What's happened? I mean, the new thing about tracking and tracing, there's so many disasters, it's actually hard to keep up with them.
Yes, and especially now, deaths wise, as we hear, without, I should add, without citations so far that I've seen, that our death rate could be as much as twice what is officially announced. I've seen 60,000 plus.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but at the same time, I want to see the figures before I come down, on it.
Yeah.
It as much as I want to see, the Tories skewered. I would. Yeah. Okay. I want them to be skewered correctly.
Yeah, but no, I'll tell you what's worrying me at the moment from a left-wing political point of view. And I don't know if we've touched on this before, but it's worth saying again.
Okay.
So Keir Starmer has been pressurising the government to publish a roadmap out of lockdown. Now,
which itself is interesting.
Yeah, but my fear is, if there's a second wave of COVID, and we've both said on this programme that we're worried there might be.
Easily will be.
I wonder what the public reaction to that is going to be, because we're basically going to get in the shit with the government. So basically what's going to happen is the public, when the second wave does hit, the public are going to blame the Tories for not implementing the first lockdown earlier and lifting the lockdown in the wrong way, so to encourage the further spread of the virus. And we're also going to get it in the neck as well, because people will just turn around and say to Keir Starmer, look, it's your fault. You're you're responsible for this. You pushed the government into adopting this position. It was you that forced them to lift the lockdown and come up with an exit strategy.
Yes. However, this is where
the
lefties amongst us, the sort of ousted Corbynites, can kind of hold our hands up and say, hey, not our fault, mate. Jeremy was asking for these, for much stricter measures far sooner, pretty much from the outset. But y'all didn't listen, so and here we are. However, that doesn't necessarily help in the immediate term. Whilst we do have that plausible deniability, it doesn't detract from the fact, and we shouldn't necessarily use it to kind of lick the finger and go, ha. you know, as far as point scoring goes.
No. I mean, look, I don't want there to be a second wave of coronavirus at all.
No one wanted that. No one wants a second wave. No one even wanted a first wave. But here we find ourselves.
I have a feeling there will be, and I have a feeling it will partly be because people will be spreading the virus if they're not in lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would do wonder sometimes after next week what the pubs and clubs and bars are going to be like. Because I wonder if people will actually go like on a big piss up the moment the bars are reopened.
This is what I'm worried about. I mean, it's tempting. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I would love to have, to go out on a massive bender and get riggedy wrecked.
Yeah.
And beer garden, beautiful weather, come back home and wake up in the morning red as a lobster because I spent far too much time out in the sun. Yeah. But it's one of those things. As much as I want to believe that the British public are not that stupid, at the same time they elected Boris fucking Johnson.
Yeah, that is true.
So I cannot put my faith in people because they cannot be fucking trusted.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm with you, Fred. It's no one would like to go and enjoy life more than I, but equally, I've got horrible images in my head that the first night after lockdown's lifted is going to be like New Year's Eve on crack, where everyone just goes out and gets drunk, and that's actually going to be a bit like what I was saying a minute ago about after the First World War, how the Spanish influenza was spread around because of the gigantic crowds that gathered in public squares to celebrate the end of the First World War.
Yeah.
It could be a bit like that. People just going to parks and pubs and clubs and beaches and having a grand old time, forgetting the fact that these crowds and these enormous herds of people are actually spreading the virus. So,
I mean, I actually went to visit a friend, socially distanced, obviously, today. And we went to the absolutely lovely Roberts Park in Saltaire. Anyone who in that area?
Well, my girlfriend lives in Saltaire.
Really? Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, big shout out to her. But yeah, Roberts Park in Saltaire, and it's an absolutely gorgeous location, and I'd never been there before. So but yeah, if you're in that area, for fuck's sake, go there because it's gorgeous. However, I noticed a lot of people were taking it seriously. People were observing the socially distancing thing. And then I saw a few other people who were gathering in the sheltered areas of the park, who were out for a picnic and drinking, which is fine. I've not, I'm especially in my current state, I definitely have no problem with people drinking.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you would not believe the amount of fucking litter that people were leaving behind. And it was literally, parts of the park were disgusting.
Yeah.
That there was plastic bottles and foil and things like this, disposable stuff, where the nearest bin wasn't even that far away, but people were not prepared to make the fucking effort. And yet, when at a time such as this, during the virus, when carbon emissions are falling at an exponential rate, have been at their lowest rate for a long bloody time now, and people are not making that extra effort to pick shit up and put it in the fucking bin. It people think, oh, it's just a few plastic bottles. That's fair enough, but gather it all into a fucking pile and see how big it is. And that's just in one park. Now go to the surrounding streets. Now go to the surrounding neighborhood. Now go to the surrounding town. And you will see a pile that is fucking huge. I've gone on a bit of a tangent here, but it was something that I thought needs to be pointed out. We cannot, as far as the future goes, from when we come out the back end of this pandemic, we cannot take our eye off the ball as far as the environment goes, because the environment fucks everybody. A virus affects a few people, i.e. the people that get it.
Yeah.
The environment affects everybody.
Yeah. I tell you, on the issue of litter, I'll tell you what annoys me. Those weirdos who take the dog shit and put it in a little, like, black bin bag. Like, why? And just leave it by the side of the path. Why?
Yes. Them that actually put it in the bins that are designated for such things, such nastiness, yes, that's fine. All power to you, and please keep doing that. But isn't it weird how a lot of you always, if you go to any park, I can't remember actively noticing it at Roberts Park, but certainly in the park that's opposite my dad's house in Cleethorpes, big up to the Sydney Park Massive. The amount of trees you go past, and people have actually tied bags of dog shit to a tree.
Yeah, I've seen it.
What the fuck?
I know, like, literally, dude. What the fuck, dude?
Yeah, that takes a lot more effort than it does to put it in an actual designated bin.
And also, who teaches them to do that? Like,
yeah, it's a weird thing, and it's gonna come to the point where people think, where kids grow up thinking that dog shit grows on trees.
Yeah, but literally, what is the reasoning behind putting it in a bag and then tying it to a hedge or a tree? Why?
Yeah, do you know what? I would have more truck with it if people were to gather it up and then upend it at the base of a tree. At the base of a tree, with, no bags or anything, dispose of the bags, but actually just leave the shit at the base of a tree, because that's in and of itself is fertilizer for the tree, and it can be repurposed, naturally. But this use of plastic that takes thousands of years to biodegrade, and even the plastic that is labeled as biodegradable, yes, it is, but it still takes many, many, many years to actually biodegrade. And it really fucks me off. Rather than this idea of a 5p charge for a carrier bag in the supermarket, what is so wrong with the American system? And it's very rare that I will advocate anything American, but that all their groceries are in brown paper bags. Paper. If you throw away a paper bag, it's gone within 5 years, if that, really. Probably about 2 years.
But also the flip side is that sounds like a great idea, but also most Americans drive to the supermarket or the grocery store, so they take their
in a car that does 8 gallons per mile. Yeah,
and they just take them back to the house in these gigantic gas guzzling cars. So yes.
I mean,
But
they give with one hand and take with the other.
For that time, putting dog shit in little black bin plastic bags and attaching them to trees is just, it just boggles the mind. I cannot.
It is literally the stupidest thing I can think of.
Yeah.
And I will give ground on anything compared to doing that. That to me makes less sense than a no-touch soap dispenser. Despite the fact that you're getting the soap, it doesn't matter if you touch it with dirty hands. You're going to be clean afterwards.
Yeah.
That tying dog shit to a tree makes less sense than a no-touch soap dispenser.
Yeah. So can I just move the conversation on a bit to?
Please do. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. The last segment of the program, which is we're going to talk about something that we've wanted to talk about for a little while now, which is I think it's fair to say a political colossus, a titan of our age. Someone who strides like a giant across the political scene. Nah, I'm just kidding with you. We're talking about Chuka Umunna.
Chuka Umunna, the person who has had more transfers than Nicholas Anelka.
We're talking about a man who, Chuka Umunna's political career is really a testament to the awfulness of the last decade. It's everything that's awful of the last 10 years of British politics summed up in one individual.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm so glad that he is now on the fucking dole line.
Yeah, because
he won't actually be. He'll have his own finance. He'll have his own company. Something, He will never suffer. A person like that who fails so catastrophically by their own volition will never actually suffer, and yet people like myself, for example, who in past careers, who has tried their damnedest and yet somehow manages to just get fucked.
Mm-hmm. I think but I tell you who will suffer. It will be the people, the working people all over the country who now live under a Tory government riding high on the hog on an 80-seat majority, partly because of him and partly because of his group in Parliament. I mean,
and it's certainly people like him and the rest of the so-called independent group for change who broke away from Labour to form their own party with blackjack and hookers, who were just so fucking who were just so set in their ways and couldn't accept the fact that shit had moved on and that their type was well and truly dead.
Yeah, exactly.
That served to split the Labour vote in 2016 and then to a much greater extent in 2019.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, Chuka Umunna and the Liberal Democrats, but also that kind of group in Parliament, the Blairites in Parliament, they are arguably the authors of last year's electoral disaster, because they did as much as they could first of all, they inflicted as much damage on Jeremy Corbyn as they possibly could do in order to keep chances of winning the 2017 election as difficult as possible.
Yes.
And then, even when the party was in with a chance of getting rid of the Tories and actually achieving government, they just piled on the hysteria, the kind of mad hysterical bullshit even more, and the result was the one we got in 2019. And
even in 2017, I mean, what was it, about 2,000 or 3,500 votes that it realistically boiled down to?
I've heard 2,500 votes across some swing constituencies would have been enough to possibly get the Labour Party into government with a minority government or a rainbow coalition or something.
Exactly, and in 2016 we had elected some absolute fucking dynamos of the left politics. For example, our beloved Laura Pidcock and Emma Dent-Coad.
Yeah.
And now, since 2019, both of those have been ousted.
Yeah.
But
what really makes me angry is these donkeys went around for about 2 years saying all the Labour Party had to do was adopt to swing fully behind a second referendum or a people's vote, and Jeremy would be shooing for Prime Minister. And in fact, exactly the opposite happened.
Yeah.
It really destroyed our credibility with the electorate, particularly in the north of England and the Midlands.
Yeah.
But worst of all, these parasites don't think they've actually got anything to be ashamed of, because throughout all of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, their criticisms and their insistence that all Jeremy had to do was pivot to the centre, adopt a people's vote or second referendum policy, and he'd be laughing, was delivered with such high-handed disdain. It was as if we were the adolescents at a grown-ups party, and they were the grown-ups who knew politics. And actually, it just revealed, the last election revealed that they know fuck all about politics. Literally, they don't know more about politics than you or I do. They really don't.
That is a low bar.
No, well, it is a low bar, but it's true. It's like all this shit about the professional political class. I mean, it's ultimately at bottom, Chuka Amuna and whatnot. They don't know any more about politics than you or I do, or any of the people we meet on the bus know about politics, or the people we know about down the pub know about politics. They're just incredibly privileged, elitist, liberal, cosmopolitan fuckwits. And the saddest thing is they authored the 2019 election disaster, and the people who are going to suffer are working class people in the north, not Chuka Amuna. But the reason we're talking about Chuka is because there has been this really quite stunning post-election moratorium published by the Liberal Democrats. It was titled "The Election: A High-Speed Car Crash." It's written by 15 Liberal Democrat councillors, activists, and members, and it was chaired by a Liberal Democrat member of the House of Lords called Baroness Thornhill. And it's an internal report looking at the Liberal Democrats' atrocious performance at the last election, which, if you remember, genuinely started with Jo Swinson confidently telling the British public, with no hint of irony, that she would be the next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I mean, she said it without irony. She genuinely believed it, and this is from the Times from a few days.
Andrew Neil absolutely fucking skewered her on that one.
Yeah. So a week ago, last Saturday, a week ago, the Times published this brilliant headline: Lib Dems blame cult of Chuka Amuna for poll defeat. So,
this is kind of what kind of annoys me about the Lib Dems, because a lot. You said about the moratorium on why the Lib Dems fucked the job, and one of the findings was because Jo Swinson spent far too much time lambasting Jeremy Corbyn, when what she should have been doing was putting her own case forward. Yeah. Despite the fact that realistically all the Lib Dems served to do throughout that entire election is to bolster the Conservative vote, because by this point the Tories were convinced and had taken the necessary steps to ensure that Leave was the one message.
Yeah.
Whereas Labour had their wrist and twisted to adopt this ridiculous halfway house idea.
Yeah.
And the Lib Dems were, of course, firmly on the Remain side of things, of cancelling Brexit altogether. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's fine. I've not got a problem with either side of Remain or Leave, in and of their principles. But realistically, when the electorate has spoken, they don't need to be mollycoddled and patronised and told that they're wrong, or that
well, that's the thing. I mean, to take it back to what you said about this hatred of Jeremy Corbyn, that was one of the most astonishing characteristics of the Liberal Democrats at the last election and in the period before. Before the last election.
Realistically, I think Nick Clegg would have found himself firmly on the Jeremy Corbyn side of electoral sort of promises, and indeed probably would have found himself allying to Jeremy.
Would he really? Do you really think so?
I actually do. In as far as the build-up to the election goes, obviously we know now that he ended up, bending over and taking it like a champ from David Cameron. However, in the build-up to that particular election, it was interesting how both Cameron and Gordon Brown were doing their utmost to sort of rally behind Nick Clegg's message at the televised hustings.
I mean, to just go back to my previous point about this hatred of Jeremy Corbyn, that's one of the most fascinating and very, very revealing characteristics of the Liberal Democrats in the last period we've just been through. It's that hatred of Jeremy Corbyn by the Liberal Democrats is so revealing. It reveals so much about who the Liberals are, what their politics are, and the class they come from. It's like,
yes,
if you're a Liberal, Jeremy Corbyn is not your enemy. I mean, because Jeremy Corbyn also has a lot of liberal views. He may be a socialist, but he's also a liberal. I mean, I expect that Jeremy Corbyn agrees with most members of the Liberal Democrats about abortion, about the legalization of cannabis, about misogyny, about fairness, all of these things, all of those kind of bread and butter liberal type of things Jeremy Corbyn agrees with. But the absolute passionate hatred of Jeremy Corbyn from the Liberal Democrats is revealing, is because I think what it revealed is they hated Jeremy Corbyn because he represented something which he reminded them of. He reminded the Liberal Democrats of what they used to be, and they've forgotten because they've become so embedded with establishment Westminster politics. I mean, there was a time in our lifetimes, not that long ago, where the Lib Dems were the left-wing choice of Parliament in Parliament.
Absolutely, and in the election to which I alluded, the Brown versus Cameron election, I actually voted Lib Dem. I should stipulate that at this time I was not a member of the Labour Party, but Nick Clegg was the one most on message with what I personally thought. Most closely aligned with my morality. And then, of course, the big U-turn. I'm sure that that particular thing, that particular event deserves its own episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should do a whole episode on how the Liberal Democrats managed to get into the parlous state they are now. I mean,
they basically went to the actual antithesis of their name.
Absolutely. I mean, the clue is in the name: Liberal Democrat. And
yet they ignore
the Charlie
of those aspects of their existence.
Make this our next episode because it reveals so much about establishment politics and how fucked up Westminster politics is. I mean, the days of Charles Kennedy are a long, long time ago. The memory of them has almost been buried by the modern Liberal Democrat Party. I mean,
I like Charles Kennedy. He was actually the local MP for my grandma's constituency of Argyll and Bute.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah, but obviously, unfortunately, he succumbed to his vice of alcohol.
Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to just give you an idea of how the Liberal Democrats used to do in the Charles Kennedy era. I mean, people got excited at the last local elections because the Lib Dems, they got they increased their number of local councillors by a little bit. There was a time in living memory when, in the Charles Kennedy era, where the Lib Dems had 56 odd MPs. As much or more than the SNP have currently, but they've completely forgotten that, and without a shadow of a doubt, it's partly, I think, that hatred which contributed to the fact to the Liberal Democrats to refuse to cooperate with Jeremy Corbyn and back Jeremy in being Prime Minister in a minority government composed of the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. I mean, that is actually the stupidest decision they ever made.
Yeah.
If they had supported, if they were just a little bit more flexible, and where they didn't take this rigid, absolutist approach to Brexit and say the only good Brexit is no Brexit. All Brexits are equally bad, no matter how mild or how grey.
Yeah.
So and we're prepared to work with Jeremy Corbyn for a soft Brexit compromise, and where they would be able to retain the aspects of the European Union which they liked.
Which indeed people like Michael Gove and Boris Johnson were adamant that we would retain, such as the single market.
Yeah. I mean, they could have had all these things if they had supported Jeremy Corbyn in a minority government. They could have gone to Brussels, renegotiated, come back with something, and got something better. But they were so up their own arse. They were so filled with their own hubris. They had drunk their own Kool-Aid so much they honestly thought, nah, we don't need it because we're going to win the next election. It was the biggest example of folly and madness. And now, they've got a Tory hard right Brexit, and do you know what it is, Fred? You can sum it up in one phrase, one 2-word phrase: liberal impossibilism. It's liberal impossibilism. It's that liberal impossibilism which is in many ways the handmaiden of last year's electoral disaster, and I've got no sympathy for them whatsoever. I think they're having a leadership election at the moment, but
but then again, obviously, firstly, we never hear about it because of obviously the entire news is taken up by coronavirus, which fair enough, I get that, but at the same time, realistically, who the fuck? Big name wise, is now standing for the leader of the Liberal Democrats, because all of the other major hitters have been and gone. Paddy Ashdown, bless him, he's now dead. Mingus Campbell, he was old back then, and now I believe he's a lord, isn't he?
Mingus,
pretty sure Mingus Campbell's now a lord, and
years old now. Actually,
say again.
He's 79 years old now.
Oh well.
He's still there. I mean, he is still he is a lord now. He's in the House of Lords now.
Ah, right, okay. There is, obviously Nick Clegg. No one will touch him with a fucking barge pole now. There is no one, name-wise, who can come to the fore in the Lib Dems. Jo Swinson kind of did come out straight out of nowhere. You know, I'd never heard of her before she became leader. And I'm so glad now that she got so roundly defeated, much the same as Nick Clegg did in 2016, you know, when he lost his seat of Sheffield Hallam. And, you know, obviously Jo lost her seat, was it Dumbarton?
Yeah, I think
Dumbarton,
so.
yeah. Where a friend of yours, I believe, is now residing from, you know, member of the Labour Party.
So, there's a she's called Anne Kerr, and I used to know her a bit in the local party here. No, but she's an absolutely brilliant Labour Party politician, and she was thinking about putting her oar in to try and see if she could become the Labour candidate in Jo Swinson's constituency at the last election, which is a shame. She ultimately decided against it, which is a shame because she would have been an absolutely brilliant candidate and would have been a brilliant MP as well. But
yes,
sociologist actually. But yeah, anyway.
At the same time, you know, probably best she didn't, because you know, you wouldn't want to throw your hat in with 2019 election at all. But anyway, you know, that aside, realistically, no one in the Lib Dems has the clout, because realistically these days it's all because of personality. You know, the Blair years typified this. It's all about personality and how wide your smile is.
Yeah.
And it's been the same ever since. You know, David Cameron was the new young baby face of conservatism, and he absolutely he stormed in. You know, Jeremy Corbyn, bless him, for as much as I love the guy, he is kind of part of the old guard. The sort of the Michael Foot kind of era.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually one of the things that I've been thinking, reflecting on the Corbyn period.
It's not a bad thing.
No, I mean, look, Corbyn's a brilliant politician, and I love the guy. But if he had an Achilles heel, it's because he had been around the party for so long. He knew everyone involved, like Len McCluskey and you know, Seamus Milne and things like that. And I was reflecting, he was in many ways, he had dedicated so much of his life to the Labour Party. He didn't really have the wherewithal to reform it properly. And I've been thinking what it's going to actually take is, and you know, it's worth reflecting on this in the week that I leave the party, is what it's going to take is a total outsider, someone who isn't familiar with the machine, isn't friendly towards the regional offices, someone who doesn't have respect for the compliance unit, doesn't have respect for the regional bureaucrats, doesn't have respect for the wreckers and the saboteurs in the in the machinery of the party. I mean, doesn't even respect the unions, doesn't respect Dave Prentice, doesn't respect Len McCluskey. It's going to take someone with who hasn't been immersed in that world.
I think eventually it's going to come down to because you know, as much as I love Len McCluskey, you know, realistically he's not going to be around forever.
No.
And I think, and this is a controversial opinion right here, but bear with me. I think that we need our version, the left in general, needs our version of a Donald Trump or Boris Johnson type character who storms in like they fucking own the place, who sticks a middle finger up at everybody, even their own party, and just says, no, fuck off, this is how it is now. Or, you know, you accuse me of something, you know, you accuse me of being X, well, actually, fuck you, because you're actually X. You know, and this is, and it worries me, because it is going to take that in the finish to capture the imagination in of a larger swathe of people. But at the same time, will we risk selling out our core principles? And this is why, as much as, I think, depending on how the policy, the actual in black and white, our policy as a party goes, the Labour Party, that will dictate very much on, if I choose to stay or go. The one thing I will never do is compromise my principles. So if Keir Starmer fucks us all off and decides to move back firmly to the centre, then I'm gone.
Yeah.
We'll end up joining the Green Party.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, Fred, why? No one's entitled to your vote.
No, not at all.
It's incumbent on politicians to earn your vote.
Absolutely.
I mean, I hated that argument from wankers like Alan Johnson, who said,
fuck Alan Johnson to the moon.
Yeah, he'll be our next hate figure on the next episode, like, because he is such a contemptible charlatan.
Yeah, and I actually used to like him, in a kind of, not in a focused, kind of I knew a lot about him sort of way, but kind of, you look at a glance and you think, not too bad.
Yeah.
Because as far as Blairism goes, he's actually quite a moderate voice. But as far as the left goes, well, fuck me, he's an absolute twat.
Yeah, he's a complete cunt gibbon.
Yeah.
But he is. He hate the argument that what he said after the election, saying that Jeremy Corbyn supporters hate the working class and all this.
Okay.
As if by campaigning for a Labour Party victory, he was somehow abusing the Labour movement. Fuck off. Fuck right off.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This hypocritical charlatan, he hasn't been backed by his own union in some elections.
That's a shock.
Yeah, so Alan Johnson stood for things. I think it was the deputy leadership once, about 12 years ago, and the CWU, his old union, didn't back him. Well, that shows you how good he is as
even the deputy leadership of the local fucking church.
He was so good as a union leader. His own union repaid their gratitude by not supporting him.
Good.
Wow. Anyway.
But just a couple of I guess, and we're sort of winding up right now. A couple of things I wanted to mention. I see that you shared a thing saying that Michael Rosen is now on.
Yes.
Very, very glad to hear that. I love Michael Rosen.
Yeah, absolutely.
First, a great poet. Regardless of any political issue, Michael Rosen is a fantastic poet, a great storyteller, and obviously he is firmly, thankfully, on our side of the debate.
Yeah, I mean, if Britain had a Senate, wouldn't you like Michael Rosen to be a senator?
I absolutely would, and I tell you what, as well, as far as poetry goes, I'd love to have studied him and his works a hell of a lot more than Carol Ann Duffy. For year 10 GCSEs, because fuck Carol Ann Duffy, by the way, because she is awful. She is a terrible, terrible poet. and I'm saying that in the cold light of day, not just because I was forced to dissect her prose. Her prose was terrible to begin with.
I will tell you the time of when I was with a group of people who got drunk, which included Carol Ann Duffy, but I'll save that story for another time.
Oh, I look forward to that.
Yeah. So anyway, basically,
she can't even read her own shit well.
Well, she did something even better than that, but I'll tell you later.
She did a strip, did she?
Well, You'd be surprised. But anyway, but no, it is excellent news that Michael Rosen is out of intensive care. He's been in there a long time. He's been there over a month now.
Yeah,
and it is absolutely good news to know that he's
absolutely, and I'm very glad, and I hope he will be back working in his various ventures soon, and wish him all the best.
If you don't know anything about Michael Rosen, I'd recommend looking up on YouTube. He's got some wonderful poetry, and there's a nice Desert Island Discs episode he did. And he also has a lot of brilliant things to say about the anti-Semitism rows in the Labour Party. They're well worth the listening.
Which is interesting, given that for those who don't know, Michael Rosen is from the Jewish community, and he was obviously quite vehement in his defence and his criticism of the disgusting rumours that were spread by the more militant areas of that sector. But anyway, there was one more thing, but unfortunately I've kind of forgotten what it was. Anyway, we'll settle on the good wishes for Michael Rosen, because it was actually a nice thing to end on, a nice thing to have to report on.
Yeah, it is. It's a very nice ending to the episode.
It is, yes. It's a very positive one, and don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that Matt Hancock's protective ring can be found in all good adult stores near you, and some shit ones too. Yeah. It's battery powered, but it only goes for 80% of the time. The rest of you have to do it yourself.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button.
Smash the like button.
Smash the like button.
Absolutely. And please subscribe for more rubbish content.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.